Hello and welcome to the Green Profit Academy Pros podcast. This show digs into the challenges in growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit. I'm Christeen Era.
And I'm Steve Bousquet. We are the green industry experts in profit, growth, and leadership.
So in today's episode, we're going to discuss how to brand your sales process with a special guest, Jack Jostes, who I have had the pleasure of connecting with a few times. We met last year, I believe it was, at Elevate. And, I love the way that he shares his content, his sales and marketing strategies, and he definitely has some ability to improve the processes you already have or get some amazing ones in place. So I want to welcome you, Jack. Thank you for taking the time today to connect with us and connect with our listeners.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Christine. Thanks for having me here today.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, what your company is, what you do.
Yeah, I'm the CEO at Ramblin Jackson. We're the snow and landscape marketing agency. We've been in business for about 14 years, and we help snow and landscape companies around the country brand their sales process to get the owner out of sales. And part of that is building websites and building lead generation systems through digital marketing and search engine optimization. And in addition to that, I run the Landscaper's Guide podcast, where you've been a guest, and I get to connect with people in the snow and landscape industry. My background in the industry started when I was in high school, and in college, I worked at Pesci's Flowers. It's a garden center and nursery in Des Plaines, Illinois. And later in my life, I had already started my marketing company and just started getting a ton of green industry clients who referred me to their other clients. And eventually, about 8 years ago, I rebranded my own company to focus exclusively on the snow and landscape industry.
And you also have a book that you put out.
I do, yeah. So I'm the author of The Tree of Good Fortune, The Landscaper's Guide to Modern Sales and Marketing. And this book helps people break out their marketing into what I call the foundation of digital marketing. There's a lot of things, Christine, that people can do to market their business nowadays, from social media to pay-per-click advertising with Google Ads to email marketing and video. It can feel overwhelming. So I created this book to help people go in the right order, which is establishing what I call the foundational four, your branding and differentiation, which is, why are you different? Why should I hire you over someone else? And a part of that is sales process, which is what we're going to dig into today. And then communicating that on your website, using the right words on your website and Google listing to show up in local SEO, and then sealing the deal with reviews, which are like word of mouth nowadays to seal the deal. So those are the four things that my company really specializes in. And the focus on sales process came about because we were generating so many leads for our clients. Some of them started to tell us, hey, we're actually getting too many leads, and it takes a lot of time to qualify them and to talk to them. And just over the years of talking with landscape clients, I would say, well, tell me more. And many landscape company owners are making a key mistake in their sales process, which is they're spending a lot of time talking with and proposing projects to unqualified customers, meaning they may not be in their service area. They may not have the budget. They may not be a timeline fit. There are a number of things. And what we'll talk about today is how you can brand your sales process so that way you're meeting with more of the right fits, people who are pre-qualified, and ultimately you're closing your sales faster.
Yeah, and I love that because the more I learn about what you do and how you work with clients, it connects so much with the pumpkin plan methodologies. And, I'm a pumpkin plan strategist, and I work with companies to pumpkin plan. And then they go, well, how do I connect that with my marketing? And your entire process, and I know this because you worked with one of the clients that I coached through the pumpkin plan, when you got together with them, it was it just went right in, like all the stuff that we had worked on, and then you were able to make it happen. And I feel like that's the gap that happens when we're talking to our clients, is we can coach them, till the cows come home, but the implementation and understanding on how to make that happen, it just falls to the wayside so that it never gets done. But I love how your methods and how you support and teach the clients you work with really gets them there. And it takes all that, who is my, ideal customer? And I know you have a fun name for it as well.
Right. We call them a hell yes customer. And a hell yes customer is, when you get that lead through your website, or when you get a referral or a phone call or wherever it's coming from, it's a hell yes, we can take care of this. We are going to do such a great job. We're going to make a profit from it, and the client's going to be happy. And so often in landscaping, companies do so many services. They try and stretch themselves too thin that they don't have a clear hell yes customer, and they're kind of growing organically through word of mouth, which is great. But when you're kind of reacting to all the leads you're getting, you don't have a clear path for growing. And what I like to help people do is, and I think you have to go through that phase, by the way. I think you have to go through often years of doing work to figure out who is my hell yes customer, and figuring out, what, I'm actually not the best at this service, or this personality type. Or I just got off the phone with a client today. He doesn't like doing HOAs. He doesn't like doing HOAs. I have another client who totally rebranded his company. He only does HOAs. Yeah. And both of them have been in business for over 20 years. So I think this is a question that you need to ask yourself at least annually, and definitely every 5-10 years, is who is my hell yes customer now? And then make your marketing really clear. So as an example, let's pretend that you do Costco's. Maybe you do some of these big commercial snow removal clients. Like, is that really clear on your homepage, on your website? Do you have a photo of a Costco, parking lot with the snow cleared? Or do you have a photo of a stock image of a freshly mowed lawn at somebody's home, right? So a lot of this gets into marketing, and like, what images are we going to put there? Are we going to put out photo? And maybe your hell yes customer is a residential lawn maintenance client. Great. Show people that. If it's not, we want to put the images out there, so that way when our customer sees our marketing, they say, oh, hell yes, these people can help me.
Yeah. It really identifies them as, the industry expert. That's their field of knowledge, and that's the clients that they service. And what you're talking about too, just from my profit first background, is this is what I've talked about as profit centers, right? When you really dig down and you identify who are our ideal customers, who do we serve, what do we love to do? You're creating that efficiency, and you're creating that focus, which can turn your business or the services you provide into a profit center.
Well, and speaking of profit centers, and I love profit first, and we talked about that, and I personally implement it. Some of this was born out of learning profit first. And a lot of it, I think, is just common sense. Some of it is just, when you think about it, it just makes sense that, I should have an ideal customer and a repeatable process for serving that customer, and a repeatable marketing system. But many people don't have that. They just have kind of a bland marketing. We work with everyone, and they don't have profit centers. They have, cost centers. Yeah. I don't know. But in particular, in the theme of sales process, as an example, one time I was talking with a client who was not very profitable. And I just started asking questions like, well, how many people are you meeting with to get to one new customer? And they said, well, we're actually sending out 20 proposals. And I said, well, tell me, like, what goes into creating a proposal? They said, well, we usually have a phone call. We then go and walk the property. Then we're drawing up a detailed estimate and a site plan. And they went into all this detail. And this was a few years ago. better technology for creating proposals now that can automate a lot of this, but they were spending 12 hours on each proposal, just on the proposal creation part. And I said, how much are you paying the person who's spending the 12 hours? And they said, oh, they're making $25 an hour. And so I just was quiet, and we both thought about the 19 times 12 hours times 25. And we were like, there's your profit loss, is you're spending all of this time trying to sell to people who are not going to buy from you. And we dug in a bit, and he said, yeah, and most of them, we are the 11th bidder and we are the 13th bidder. And I knew as soon as I met them that they weren't going to buy. And I said, well, why don't you stop selling to them? And so we modified their sales process, and they got closer to, within honestly just changing who they said, yes, we'll come and meet with you, they got their close rate from 1 in 20 to 1 in 5.
Wow.
So it saved them those other, 14 sales, 15 sales that they weren't going to make anyways to still get to the 1. So that's an example of like just modifying your sales process can help you save a lot of money. Or another story, I actually have the note cards with me here. I hosted a Breakfast of Champions table at Elevate, or I think it was actually at the time it was called Landscapes, whatever. It was the NALP thing. And I had people write down what their biggest problem was. And one guy wrote down, it was sales process. And his problem was he was spending over 12 hours a week meeting with people who were not buying from him. And this was the owner of a $3 million landscape company. Wow. And I'm like, well, why are you doing that? And he said, well, my office manager sent me out to meet with somebody, and they lived 90 minutes from the office. And when I got there, I realized that they had a $2,000 budget for what would have started at $20,000 for us. It was for a patio. And so they spent literally the whole day, 3 hours driving plus an hour meeting with this person to find out that there was no chance that they could work together. And so that's where I want to start with people today in this conversation and sales process is some light pre-qualification on the phone, right? So, hey, we'd love, Mrs. Smith, we'd love to come and see your patio. Hey, before we come out, and one of the things I coach my clients to do, and we build for them, is a pricing guide on the website. Have you had a chance to read our pricing guide on the website? And I'll tell you, Christine, that 90% of customers have it open by the time they're ready to call in. And they are so qualified. They're like, yeah, we think this project's in the $20,000 to $30,000 range. Oh, okay, tell me a little more. Yeah, you're probably in that ballpark. So if we came out and we went through the process and created an estimate, is that 20 to 30? Is that something that you're feeling comfortable investing in your backyard at this time? Oh yeah, absolutely. That, right? So giving the customer the information even ahead of the call is going to prevent the $2,000 expectation for what the landscaper is wanting to charge $20,000. The other thing it does is I think it serves the customer. It helps them. I don't know if you've had a landscaper or any kind of professional come to your home, like you kind of need to be ready. Oh, we're going to be there at 3. So now you got to be there and you're like waiting for them. And it's kind of embarrassing if they show up and you are way under budget on what they're going to want to charge you, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we brand in sales processes is we might even brand that initial phone call.
Yeah, and I love that because I hear you saying so much around what we end up coaching our clients on, right? When they come to us, usually there's a profit bleed. They're not making enough money. Their margins and markups are off. They're going, I don't know where it is. And I love that you're reverse engineering for one, like the sales process. And one of the things, the challenges I've had with working with marketing companies is when you start talking about ROI, right, on the things that they do, there's all this jabber and there's really no clarity. But what I'm hearing from you is you're helping provide some of that clarity on the return on investment in what you guys are trying to solve, the problems that you are trying to solve, and just connecting. You're saying that $25 an hour that you were sharing with that salesperson, and the 12 proposals. We're not even thinking about labor burden, and admin time and these other costs associated with it. But if you do a quick calculation, there's a loss right there that most likely is not even being considered in their bid process. So it's sunk costs. Again, another loss here with labor, another loss with it not being considered in the sales process.
Well, and also the morale cost. I mean, would you want to be a salesperson closing 1 out of 20? Like after, you know what I mean? After a certain point, like it's just kind of demoralizing to be spending that many hours on things that don't end up happening. Like I would be pretty frustrated if I were that person. So recruiting and retention is often a pain and problem in the industry. And I think that's related to Hell Yes customer, because if you have a Hell Yes customer and a process for serving that customer, and then a sales and recruiting pipeline, not a recruiting, sales and marketing pipeline, your employees will be more attracted to that because they'll be doing good work that they feel comfortable with. Whereas if they're being pulled into projects that the company isn't staffed for, or they feel like they're not doing a good job, they may be likely to leave. So some of it, I think you can draw a direct ROI to, and sometimes we can't. Sometimes people don't. That client happened to know their close rate. They happen to know their numbers. I have a lot of people who have no idea how many they're sending out, how many are closing, how much time are they spending.
Yeah, so you almost have to help create that narrative for them so they can kind of connect the dots by asking, some questions and pulling it together and then improving the process.
Usually, though, people have a feeling of being overworked or stretched too thin, or just the frustration of going and losing this many sales repeatedly is the feeling that ultimately leads them to talk to me about this.
Yeah, I think that there could be some shame around, what business owners don't know. And there's this idea that, if I opened up a business and I'm good at my craft, I should know everything else and I should be good at it. And that's not the case. And that we find that a lot with our clients that we work with, both at Core Growth Strategies and Green Profit Academy, is we have that conversation of it's okay that you don't know. What isn't okay is that you don't lean into the people that do know and get them on your team to fix the problem. So, that's where the wheels come off, right? When they're trying to grow and run their business.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why I said I do think it takes years to figure out your Hell Yes customer. And I know in my own business, it took me years to figure that out. And there's a lot about business that I don't think you can learn until you just go and start doing it. Like, I think you could get an MBA or read all the business books, but there's a lot of stuff that you just have to go and do, and then do it poorly to then learn that you need to do it well. Or at least that's how my path to where I'm at now is 14 years in. I didn't know any of this stuff in the first 5 years. And it caused, and honestly, this focus on sales process was partly born out of having kids. When I had kids, prior to having kids, I could work 60, 80, 100 hours a week. Very proudly. I would work a lot and it was fine. I was growing a business. I didn't have kids. And then I remember a business coach said to me, well, what are you going to do when you have kids? You're not going to be able to work 60, 80, 100 hours. I'm like, you don't know who you're dealing with. I'm going to be able to do it. And then in my own sales process, so many people either wouldn't show up to meetings, or I was just really frustrated. I was like, wow, I really need to make money now that I have kids. And I also don't have all the time to do it anymore. And so that kind of naturally caused me to focus on, during that time, I really studied sales process. And some of the people that I studied were Dave Curlin, who wrote Baseline Selling, and Dave Sandler. And they both are very, especially Dave Curlin, he called it baseline selling, where you'd have, if you'd envision a baseball diamond and going to all the different bases. And so that started me to actually start writing down milestones. So that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about today. Was I would literally take out a piece of paper and write down some of the big milestones in your sales process. So typically there's going to be an initial phone call, or at least I hope there is, right? Because, and then maybe there's a site visit, meaning you're going to go and visit the homeowner's property. And then at some point you're going to get to sending or creating a proposal. And then for some clients, it's different. So if it's lawn care, some of these people can quote over the phone. They don't even need to see the property. And we're seeing different technology and AI come into that, where you can map out someone's property and say, hey, you have this many square feet. Here's our estimate.
Yeah,
cool.
You can send it on a postcard. Like, the technology that they have is they geomap it. They'll do so many properties in a route to close market saturation, and then they can email it and send it on a postcard. I mean, it's phenomenal, the technology that's out there.
Yeah, it is. And, for more of a design build project, you're probably going to go and need to meet with people and develop a relationship, and you can charge during those milestones. So for some of my clients, I coach them to charge for the initial visit. And what happens is it weeds out people who are not serious. And the close rate for my clients who charge, and I'm talking, some of them charge $79, some of them charge $297 just for the initial consultation. But their close rate is typically north of 90% of the people who buy that initial appointment, who then will take the next step and buy a design and then get to the next step, which is a construction agreement. So I'm sharing this partly because I know there are probably people listening who may do lawn care only. Maybe they don't do any construction, and there may be people who do construction, and there may be people here who do commercial. In any case, writing down the milestones and having in a key qualification milestone is my number one tip for people, meaning that before you get to steps 3 through 7, step 2 is and maybe you brand it as, if you had it's Era, right? Christeen Era.
Yep.
So if you had Erascapes landscapes, right? You might even brand that initial call as the Erascapes dream call, where we're going to talk about your dreams for your landscape. Oh, cool. That's what I really want. I want a landscape designer who can inspire me. And then on that call, you can qualify budget a little bit, some rough timeline. Hey, if this, what's your timeline for having this done? Oh, we need it done in 3 weeks because we're having a high school graduation party. Oh, well, thanks for telling me that. We're currently scheduling installations for 3 to 4 months from now, and that timeline can vary based on weather. Oh, 3 to 4 months? I would never wait that long. Okay, right. Well, thank you very much. If you'd like to revisit this in the future, please let us know. And now you've saved yourself the 3 hours of driving, or however. Hopefully, I think everybody's service area is different. Some people will not drive. They don't need to drive 3 hours. Some people, maybe you do. But that phone call can protect your time.
Yeah, and I think too that it's not even, maybe the salesperson who needs to do the call, or the guy who's going to go out on site. It can be the office manager or an admin who can set up some of the qualification questions. And that alone can save time and money and even, man hours, right? That you're actually tending to the people who will close on a good sale.
You can absolutely coach a admin to do this, or even a chat bot. Like you could, I think some of this so I have something called the Hell Yes Customer Worksheet, and it's essentially what services do you offer? What service areas do you offer them? And then what is the minimum budget? I recommend that everyone have a minimum budget and know what is the minimum. And I even follow some lawn care guys who they have a $200 minimum. So we'd be happy to come and take care of the shrubs and this small project. By the way, we have a $200 minimum. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not driving out here for $57 and not making any money just from the time of being there.
Yeah, and I love that too, because we've had to coach around, where somebody brings up a challenge and they're like, well, I've been getting a couple calls, or I'm supposed to go quote this one guy, and should I do it? What does that look like? And then we have to talk about the lost opportunity cost that's involved, when they consider something out of their area and they haven't qualified it to that degree. So I love this branding around, are you our ideal customer? Hell yeah, customer. Are you, do you fit in our service model, that we provide our customers? And really, kind of like that, how are we going to be able to work together to be successful, to where our expectations are defined as a service provider, and we understand your expectations as well as a customer, and how are we going to show up to get this done? So it's more of a team engagement that you're working with a client, instead of I'm going to pay you and you're going to come deliver.
Right. Yeah. The other thing that the branding of your sales process does is it allows you to enable team members to sell part of it, right? So maybe I wouldn't expect your office admin to be able to accurately quote a design build project, but they don't have to. If you brand it and you could get them to do some of the pre-qualification, or even to sell the initial consultation, they could sell that, and they could fill your calendar with that part, and that frees up your time from having to do those initial steps. So you could teach a junior level salesperson or office admin, maybe they can do the 15-minute call. Yeah. And maybe you pay them a no bonus. Maybe when they tell people no, they are somehow incentivized. I think that some people really struggle with this idea of telling people no, because the landscape industry is a service industry, and we want to take care of customers, and we do want to serve them, and we may feel obligated to help them if they're a referral, and that can cause a lot of problems. So the one client that I mentioned who was spending the 3 hours to get to the person's property, who had a $2,000 budget for a $20,000 patio, they felt obligated to go out there because it was a referral. And I asked them, like, how do you think the experience was for that woman who waited all these hours for you to come out there to tell her no? Like, was that better than having told her that on the phone and saved her the hours? And they said, oh, I guess I just cost that person several hours and like excitement and hoping they could help. You don't have to be rude about it. It's just, hey, our projects start at $20,000 for this, and it's on our website.
Yeah. So saying no can be kind and professional. And
I think
maybe when they can't afford that $20,000, they will come back to you to have you do the work because the way you showed up to tell them no.
Yeah. And that's again, the other, I think the benefit of a pricing guide, which is not a menu. It's a lot of times people are like, well, I could never have a pricing guide because it depends on, and then they verbally say all the things that it depends on. And I'm like, great, let's just record you saying that, transcribe it. We'll put it on the website. It depends on the square footage of your yard. It depends on the material selection. It depends on all these things. So you can let people know that it depends on a lot of things, and we can arrive at a detailed proposal for you, and they're typically in this range, right? So most contractors tell people this all day long, on the phone or in person. Put it on your website. Give people that ballpark, and if possible, some brackets. That's another thing that I help people do, is create, a entry, mid, and top level bracket. And maybe the top level, some people do projects that are over $1 million. I have several clients who they've done over $1 million projects, and listing that can help the person who's looking for $1 million project know, okay, great, they've done that. And also, if you can't do that, then do put an upper limit. I think sometimes people are embarrassed to put an upper limit, but I know some clients who are very profitable doing $15,000 landscape installations. And they don't want to deal with the $75,000 projects where they're there for multiple weeks and permits and different crews and skilled labor and all this project management. So I just wanted to share that, because I think sometimes people think that bigger is better, or they need to put out the biggest, best photos of the best landscape installation they've ever done. And no, you want to put out your hell yes project. If your hell yes project is a $1,000 project, then put your best photos of that.
Yeah, because then you're going to get those customers who are going to contact you for those, those projects. So it's really identifying your lane, owning it, and staying in that lane to create a profit center. And you're doing this by understanding who your hell yes customer is, creating your sales process branding, so that, like you're saying, that tiered sales guide that says, hey, this is what you can expect. This is how we're going to come into this. This is kind of like the cost, and you're branding it to who your company is. So whatever branding you have, and you're tying, kind of those taglines and things to that. So it just really brings it all together. Core Growth Strategies provides business growth management solutions through cloud accounting, bookkeeping, and strategic business consulting programs. Our team works with small businesses in lawn care and landscape and trade industries throughout the U.S. We increase our clients' business acumen by creating business performance transparency through financials and strategic advisement based on industry best practices and benchmarks. Our experienced team provides support, guidance, and coaching, thereby allowing our clients to connect with viable data and discover their own solutions. Core Growth Strategies programs and services are designed to get your business from where it is now to where you have always dreamed it to be. Visit us today at coregrowthstrategies.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Don't miss our exclusive limited time podcast special. Just mention promo code GPA Pro to any member of our team during your complimentary consultation, or enter the promo code on our site when you sign up for one of our online programs. That's promo code GPA Pro.
I love branding the names of these meetings, because I think a lot of times in sales, you're selling the meeting, meaning you need to sell the appointment. People are probably browsing your website, and there's this apprehension of like taking the first step of like, oh, I'm going to talk to a salesperson. Are they going to sell me something? And the more that you can make that meeting seem like something that's valuable to the client, the more likely they'll be to request an appointment or to show up to it.
So what other key elements would you advise of a lawn and landscape business to consider in branding their sales process?
One of the things is, what do you want people to know before each phase of the sales process? So as an example, I have a dentist appointment on Monday, and they sent me a text message, and I guess I didn't reply to it on Tuesday. So they said, hey, you haven't confirmed your appointment. Reply C to confirm. And I'm like, oh yeah, cool. And I know what they're doing. They make money by me showing up on time for that appointment. The dentist is there. He's got all of his instruments and things, and he's got people, and like his job is to do my teeth cleaning as efficiently as possible and move on to the next person. And I also want that experience too. I don't want to be there any longer than I have to. So what I think is similar about the landscaping sales process is, what could you send to people before the meeting? So let's pretend that you get the on-site visit scheduled. Maybe they pass that first phone call. What would they need to know in order to close to the next step from that at-home visit? So typically, I really think every sales process, you're always selling the next step. So your website is kind of positioning this initial phone call. Once they've passed that, what is the next step? And is it really clear? And then what would the customer need to know in order to buy the next step after that? This is where many lawn and landscape companies fail, because they will come to that meeting and ask for a $3,000 design deposit or whatever it is. And if your customer is really surprised, that puts them like in an uncomfortable, like you're in their house or at their house and you're like asking for $3,000 that I didn't know about. Whereas again, if that was clearly communicated on the website, and for many of my clients, we go as far as making a video that people watch before that meeting. And so that video might be really short. Hey, thanks so much for calling the Aeroscapes at-home design consultation. We're going to come to your house, walk your property, hear your ideas, and give you a rough, budget range for some of the ideas that you have. And the next step after that would be hiring us for landscape design, where we're going to actually start designing a design. And here's what designs look like. Maybe you show a screen. The investment for the landscape design phase is $1,500. And we will ask you at the end of that meeting if you'd like to move forward with that. So we look forward to seeing you at your at-home design consultation. And now the customer's like, oh, like the next step from this meeting is a $1,500 payment. Mm-hmm. And what can happen is maybe it's a couple, maybe it's a married couple, and maybe they both can't be there at that meeting, but they could decide beforehand, you know what? Yeah, if you like Christine and you like her design, go ahead with the $1,500. That's going to prevent I need to talk to my spouse, my roommate, my partner, my HOA board, whatever it is. So you can prevent that. Now, they may still say they need to think about it, but they're not going to be as embarrassed about or shocked about hearing that the next step is paying $1,500. So that would be my tip for like a design build client, would be to help people understand where they're at in the process, and in some ways over communicate. Here's what's going to happen next and when it's going to happen.
Yeah, and I truly believe, and this is from experience too, is we remember what happens first and we remember what happens last. And there's very little that we remember in between. So we've worked with contractors who's come to our house, to do like patio work. And we remembered what happened at the beginning and all the things that they told us. But then what happened in the middle didn't add up to what happened in the beginning. And what happened in the end was not so great, because we weren't happy with the promises not being delivered, and there was some confusion. And so we're like, wow, it started off really good. It kind of was all muddled in the middle, and then it ended badly. So I think it's really important what you're sharing here is, and we do this even over at, Core Growth Strategies, where we do accounting, is we help the customer understand, what does your journey look like? Yes. What is our process? What can you expect? What's our end goal in this, just by having each stage of the conversation? So I know there's a ton of value there. And I think it also shows up differently of how are you as a professional business owner? So it's building that trust as you're going through the process because of the way you're communicating.
Yeah, absolutely. When sales and marketing match the actual operations, then you have a happy customer. But if you're selling and marketing something that then operationally doesn't happen, then that's when people get unhappy, right? And then that creates negative word of mouth, or maybe negative reviews, where my whole thing is to kind of over communicate. Here's how it works. Here's how much it's going to cost roughly. And then go and do that. It's kind of simply doing what you say you're going to do. But many people in the landscape industry have done this for so long, 10, 20, 30, 40 years in some case, that they're, in their mind, it's just like clockwork going on. Oh, we're going to do this. And the customer must know that it's going to take me 3 weeks to get materials. And meanwhile, the customer's like, I just paid you $1,500 and I haven't heard from you in 3 weeks. Like, you must not be doing anything. Right. And that's where, like, simply like letting them know ahead of time, hey, by the way, here's what we're doing next. Email templates. Not all of this needs to be a video, but email templates, kind of like the dentist saying, hey, your appointment is here. They're not personally writing that. They have a little system that when an appointment is scheduled, they send out a reminder a week ahead of time. So I like visualizing it. Most landscapers are visual thinkers. They build things. And I love taking like a big whiteboard or a piece of paper and then writing down. I actually have a podcast. I call them milestone videos. But what in between those milestones can you communicate to people so they feel good? Because if they don't know what's going on, they're going to assume the worst. Yeah. And then their neighbors ask, hey, I noticed your backyard is ripped up. How's that project going? Well, actually, it's not going very well. Do you want them to say that? Or, oh, right now they're getting a permit and we're getting material and the next step is this. And I also know that this is hard to do. I just want to acknowledge that this is hard to do. Like here in Colorado, we had, I think, the wettest spring, at least in the years that I've lived here. And I know that there's so much chaos that can happen when things are delayed by weather and everything gets crazy, and it can be really hard to communicate with people. And that's why I love the templates and videos and things. Like, you just send the template, maybe personalize it a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a fact, right, in this industry that your business is impacted by Mother Nature. You don't have control over it. You're working outside. I know, like you said, this last year we had the wettest spring ever. The year before we had insane winds that delayed, spray application for months, because there was like very few days that they could get out there where the winds were died down enough for them to actually deliver on the spray applications. So having a system in place to communicate change, to communicate the obstacles, the expectations, and the needs, I think is key in any business, and especially when it comes to your sales and delivery process. And I just want to clarify, Jack, are you saying, am I understanding you clearly, because I don't want to make an assumption, is that you support the client through this process of creating the templates, understanding stage by stage and step by step the sales process, and supporting them in automating it, creating the templates and understanding what's next. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that is something that we do. So there's varying levels of marketing. My feeling on marketing is that it often gets lumped into lead generation, but I see marketing as part of your operations and communication with clients. Meaning, so not only can you attract new customers, but once you have them, how do you communicate with them? And that's something that we help people with in their sales process, whether from videos or emails. As far as setting up the automation, some clients are really savvy and they have service autopilot totally dialed in, and they just need some help. And some people have nothing, and that might be as simple as giving them a Word doc that they can copy and paste from. So I have clients of a variety of different sizes and technology levels, but that is something that we help people with.
So you and your team help them understand the journey and get it out of their head get it mapped out, get the stages and steps documented. And the reason I'm saying this is so valuable when you go to scale and grow your business, because a business without systems is just a business of you. It's not one that you can really sell as an asset. It's kind of like, you're like, here's a problem. How much will you pay me for it? Right? I want to get some money out of it. But when you have systems in place, one, it makes it scalable. And two, it's an asset that you can, show in your company, like, hey, we have this documented sales process. This is our marketing process. We worked with a professional, and I stopped doing it 5 years ago. And since we've had these, handful of team members who's been able to implement and follow it since.
Yes. I think that's a really valid point of thinking of the digital side of the business, of the assets and the sales process. And some people will say, well, I closed 95% of the business. Well, and they also want to sell their company. Well, what am I actually buying?
Yeah.
You have month-to-month contracts, some equipment, and you do all of the sales, versus a business, like you said, where there's a documented sales process. There's all of this information that people can buy. And, one of my clients was recently purchased, and the buyer was very curious about all of their sales and marketing, their keyword rankings, the website, how many leads is it generating? And that's another thing we do that seems really basic to me, but we build a spreadsheet that tracks, how did you hear of us? And that, to a potential buyer, shows them, okay, what marketing is generating the leads for this business?
Yeah.
So tracking, how did you hear of us? I actually use QuickBooks. I use the territory field in QuickBooks Online.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you all are using that, but if you don't have a territory, if it's an unused field, you can then do a sales by territory report. What do you do for marketing in QuickBooks? Anything? Do you coach people to track marketing in QuickBooks?
Yeah, so we look at our sales, by area, just like you're saying, territory. So I have different, we're across the US. So I have different states listed of where we can track, where that came from. And then with our marketing, it's, our person gives us a report to let us know like what source it came from. And so, yeah, I think that's really valuable. I think a local business, if they're serving an area and they're not cloud-based like we are, right, then they're going to find a lot more detailed use for it in their QuickBooks. And we've even advised, by location, like, hey, okay, where did this one come from? And we break out the financials by using the classes or the territories, like you're saying, to understand like what are their service areas and how profitable are they. So, that gives them some insight on the understanding, like, well, where are our customers coming from, and, what's the profit on them. And we also do it by, based on their business models, we advise them to break out, their different services that they provide, so we can run profit and loss on that and understand, well, what's your lawn application do for you? What's your maintenance do for you? What's your lighting, do for you? So when they're that 3-ring circus business model, we can drill down and understand what their profit centers are, and should they even continue to provide, those services. And I'll just share what we discovered with one of our clients which is kind of odd, right, is his profit center was commercial maintenance, which typically isn't a profit center for most businesses. It's like, well, yeah, it can make money, but we have to have high volume, right? And he didn't have a high volume, but he made a lot of profit. And it just happened to be where he was located and what his market needed and how he could serve them. So it gave him a better understanding of whether he should let go of residential maintenance and focus on commercial, Or, and in the beginning, it was like, well, maybe I should let go of commercial and focus on residential. And he found out that he would have been letting go of his profit center if we hadn't, done that advanced scalable growth business model profit first assessment and dug into this. But the only reason we were able to really find that clarity too is because he was tracking things like you were saying about like territories or even, services provided.
Yeah, I think, tracking that in your accounting program is so valuable, and analyzing it with somebody like you is really important to figuring out who is your hell yes customer, looking at profit and loss by service type or class of revenue or whatever it is. And then, thinking, and that's why I said, I think it takes years to get to the point where, you have data to look at and figure that out. But I like hearing that.
Yeah. So, just to get an overview, you're talking about branding their sales process. Can you just kind of give us like a summary of those steps that you're sharing today?
Yes. So the summary of branding your sales process is to, write down, and I would do this on paper, or you could even take sticky notes. What are the key milestones of every sales process that you don't want to skip? And in the early stage, I would encourage you to have a pre-qualifying phone call. And on that phone call, you're going to talk about budget range and what services do people need, what timeline do they have before you go and spend time in person with them. Just having some of that light qualification. I believe you can apply that to most sales processes, regardless of commercial or residential, design build, all those different things. And then communicate them on your website. This was a key part that we didn't talk about, is branding it, maybe even designing a graphic on your website that communicates the process. So that way, when people are learning about you, they know what is the next step. And then communicate that process and what is the next step after each meeting. So after I've had that initial phone call, send an email, write a template like, hey, it was great talking with you on the phone about X, Y, and Z. The next step is and maybe you brand the title of it, the Aeroscapes Design Consultation, where we're going to come to your home and we invite you to check out our pricing guide before that, and know that the next step is a $1,500 design deposit, or whatever that next step is. So you're constantly selling the next step, and that way when they get there, they aren't surprised that that's the next step.
And what's the sweet spot of this, this image? Because I know what you're talking about. We have a 6-step process at Core where we say this is going to be your stages. And I know in working with people in this industry and in business, it's 1, 2, 3, many, right? So step 1, 2, 3, and anything after that is many. So what would you say is a good, kind of number of processes to where you're saying, hey, this is our process?
I would generally keep it under 9 steps if possible. I prefer odd numbers. That's just a preference. Several people have a very successful 6-step process or an 8-step process, but I prefer odd numbers.
Yeah, and I think at GPA we have a 4 or 5, step process, just letting them know like how we're going to work with them and what they can expect. But yeah, I think that's important to give them kind of like that 1,000-foot view.
Yeah, it's a high level process. So there may be little steps in between that you have internally that are checked. This is not necessarily a checklist of everything that needs to be done. It's like milestones, big key milestones. It's not necessarily a detailed process. I do need to wrap up for a meeting on the hour. So are you able to edit that out, me saying that?
Yes. Yeah, I can. All right. Yep. So we'll just jump into the, you sharing a little bit about, I'll thank you, and then sharing a little bit about your summit, and then we'll tie it up.
Okay.
All right. Well, Jack, I really appreciate you sharing the branding the sales process. I think that there's probably so much more that you could talk about, and the value that this could bring to any lawn and landscape company. Before we tie up today, I know that you have a summit coming up that we would like to share with our listeners. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you, Christine, for having me on the show today. And we do have a virtual conference on Thursday, October 26th. It's the Landscapers Summit, focused on sales, marketing, and leadership, where we have guest speakers from the industry. We're going to teach people how to coach your employees to solve problems without you. We're going to share the results of the Snow and Landscape Sales Survey, where I've surveyed over 200 landscape companies about sales process and close rate. So we'll share all of that. And then I have 3 landscapers competing with each other for a What's Working Now contest. So good information on sales, marketing, recruiting, leadership. You can sign up online at landscapersummit.com. And we'd love to see you all there. It is a virtual event, and for 1 ticket, you can bring your whole team.
That's awesome. I know I'm not going to be around. I really wish I was going to be, because it would be something I would love to attend. So I don't know if you're allowing any signups to get the recordings of this afterwards.
Yeah,
I know I would be interested.
Yeah, we will be recording the summit and releasing the edited version as an online course. So it'll be dialed in. You can listen to it or watch it, consume it on a mobile device or online. So definitely check it out, landscapersummit.com. And also, if you haven't already gotten a copy of my book, The Tree of Good Fortune, maybe you could put that in the show notes. This has a lot. It has a whole chapter on process and some of the things we talked about, and that's at treeofgoodfortune.com.
Yes. I will definitely include the Landscaper Summit information in the show notes. I will include the book. And also, I'm going to include a code for $20 off of Jack's summit that he is presenting on the 26th of this month. So make sure you take advantage of that. He very kindly gave that as a gift to our listeners. So thank you.
That's right. So yeah, see the show notes and use that promo code and come and learn. Come spend the day with us. It'll be fun.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here, Jack. And thank you to our listeners for tuning into today's episode. And we hope that you found this discussion insightful and some knowledge that you can implement on how to brand your sales process with Ramblin Jackson.
Thank you, Christine. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast,
the show that digs into the challenges of growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit.